The Higher Power of Lucky, Chapter 17, HMS Beagle Disobeys. A part of her mind was telling Lucky that if she ran away, she would lose her job at the Found Object Wind Chime Museum and the Visitor Center. That certain brain compartment also worried about getting into deep trouble and being sent away. But a bossier, louder crevice of Lucky's brain argued that she had already decided about running away. There were already all of her plans and all the supplies, and all the hard work of running away. All that would be wasted if she gave up now. Then another part of Lucky's brain reminded her that there was the new problem of Miles. She should be helping to find him. It was her fault that he was missing. Even though, she reasoned, she'd had to get rid of him in order to run away herself. But this particular running away was her running away. If Miles had also ran away, instead of just, for instance, hiding out under Dot's back porch, it would be like sharing it, and Lucky did not want to share it. If there was glory, she wanted all the glory, and if there were problems, well, they were his mother's problems, the price she paid for being in jail. Lucky put her dust mask on to make herself quit thinking and just go. She snatched up Miles's book and crammed it into the plastic sack with her rolled-up towel. Then she got her arms into her backpack straps, jumping to center it on her back. It weighed 800 pounds. She soaked a dish towel and draped it over her head, using Bridget's sweatband to anchor it on top and safely pinning it together under her chin. She looped the plastic sack over her waist. Lucky had HMS Beagle ran down the trailer steps. It was way noisier outside. The canvas awning strained and flapped as the wind roared. The trailers creaked and rocked on their blocks. The wind blew towards the open desert, which was where Lucky was heading, so at least she had it at her back. With HMS Beagle trotting ahead, they crossed the invisible boundary of the edge of Hardpan into the Bureau of Land Management land, leaving the town and walking onto the vast Mojave Desert. Lucky felt that it was good she was so well prepared, otherwise she'd have been a tiny bit scared. They struggled down the sandy road that led across the desert to some abandoned mines in the distant hills. Lucky knew it was important to stay on the rutted road to keep from getting lost. She kept a tight grip on her plastic sack, which twisted and strained to fly away. Her dish towel flapped and made it hard to see, but was cool and kept some of the swirling sand out of her hair. Uprooted plants and old junk whipped past. After about 20 minutes, Lucky needed to pee. She went off to the side, watching for snakes and scorpions and nasty types of cactus, and squatted, pulling her underpants down and the silk dress up to her waist. She planted one toe on the handles of the plastic sack to keep it from flapping away. It was hard keeping her balance with the backpack on, but she didn't want to take the thing off and then have to put it on again, with no chair or counter to back up to. She realized that the toilet paper was wrapped up in a towel inside the sack, and undoing everything to get it would be impossible. Right now, for peeing, it was okay. You just stayed squatting, and the wind dried everything in a quick minute. But later on, Lucky would need to organize her stuff better, with the toilet paper on top. As she lurched to her feet and pulled her underpants up at the same time, the whole weight of the backpack seemed to shift and she lost her balance and fell backward. Stuff in her backpack crunched and something smashed into her spine. It made her feel discouraged, like if you took the word apart into two sections of dis encouraged. It was getting harder and harder to stay encouraged. She rolled over onto her hands and knees and stayed that way for a while, panting into her mask. Hard little rocks pressed against her knees through the silk and nipped her palms. Not a soul in the world knew where she was, or cared. She was nothing but a speck on the surface of the earth. Lucky almost didn't have the strength to stand up again. But then HMS Beagle went bounding way down the road. Even my dog abandons me, thought Lucky, but she heaved herself up, clutching the plastic bag, and plowed on. Lucky stole her technique of keeping going from the anonymous 12-step people, whose slogan is one day at a time. If you think of undoing a big habit day after day for the entire rest of your life, you can't bear it because it's too overwhelming and hard, so you give it up. But if you think of only getting through this one day and don't worry about later, you can do it. Lucky used the one day at a time idea by putting one foot in front of the other without thinking about what would happen later. She knew she could do one step and then another step and then another step and then another step, as long as she thought one step at a time. But the wind was a terribly strong enemy. Sometimes it pushed her so hard from behind that she thought it would knock her over. Once a huge thing that turned out to be most of a washing machine hurled past her, and she saw a sheet of pillowcase, probably ripped by the wind from someone's clothesline, sailing out to the desert. When HMS Beagle suddenly veered across the path to sniff at a pile of old rags, Lucky did not pause. She pressed on, believing the dugouts must be closed now, though she couldn't see very far in any direction. The dugouts would give shelter from the wind. After a while, she looked back through the blast of dust. HMS Beagle was sitting by the rags. HMS Beagle, come, she said, but her words were whooshed away by the wind. Lucky gestured with her whole arm for the dog to come. HMS Beagle sat. Lucky grimly turned away and went on. Of course HMS Beagle was going to leave her by herself. What worse thing could happen? When the road curved around a low hill, Lucky suddenly couldn't get her bearings. Was this some fork she'd forgotten about? She didn't remember the road curving like that, which made her heart pump out waves of panic. The project was to run away, not to get lost. She looked behind her, nothing but the thick blanket of brown dust. But the hill on her right provided a buffer, so instead of turning back, she pulled the dishcloth away from her face, so she could peer around. Halfway up the hill was a level shelf, and behind the shelf, the dugouts. 5 uneven door-sized holes leading to shallow caves in the hill. She'd gone much farther than she'd realized. Seeing the dugouts made Lucky feel almost like she'd come home. Lucky staggered up to the first dugout, a cave about the size of her canned ham trailer. In that protected spot, the roar and powerful force of the wind let go its grip, and Lucky shrugged off her backpack at last. At the cave entrance, she unrolled the towel and laid it out like a picnic blanket, weighing the corners with stones. It was an excellent choice that she was wearing a beautiful silk French dress as her running away outfit, although it was now covered with grit and dust. She arranged herself on the towel in a beauty queen way. If Lincoln had been there, she would have asked him to teach her how to make a knot so strong it would never come undone. Lucky re-rolled the stuff from the towel into her jacket. She gripped off her mask and took a big swig of Gatorade. The dishcloth was completely dry now, and when she shook it out, she found her hair and ears. The corners of her eyes, her eyelashes, and eyebrows were full of sand. She began to worry about HMS Beagle. HMS Beagle, she shouted. Beak. She pictured her dog meeting a sidewinder on the road, or maybe she got conked by a flying lawn chair. What if HMS Beagle was in trouble? Why else wouldn't she have finally caught up? Lucky was bone-weary and couldn't bear the thought of going back into the windstorm. But she was also lonely and worried, and the worried part was the strongest. Leaving the plastic bag, Lucky ran down the road to find her dog. Heading into the wind turned out to be way, way harder, even without her backpack and supply sack. Lucky had to scuttle along, doubled over like an old woman, keeping her squinted eyes on the road. Without a mask or the dishcloth on her face, her face was completely exposed. He couldn't see more than a feet ahead. She almost tripped over HMS Beagle, who trotted up to her with her head low to the ground, her ears whipping forward. She touched Lucky with her nose and then abruptly turned and bounded back towards the town. Maybe HMS Beagle was right and they should go home. Lucky stopped. Hey, Beak! She yelled. Then, faintly, she heard a cat or some other animal crying, and saw that HMS Beagle was nudging that pile of rags. Very carefully, Lucky approached the thing, which was huddled in a tight ball. It looked like the thing was rolled up in an old tablecloth or sheet. Sticking out of the roll was a small sneaker with a toe poking through the hole in the side. The Higher Power of Lucky, Chapter 18. Cola Burr. Miles, she thought. Oh, la vache. She wanted nothing to do with him. She longed to turn around and go back to the dugout. Miles was too much trouble, and he was ruining everything. He hadn't seen her because he'd completely rolled himself up in the tablecloth. One he must have snagged as it flew by, so he'd never know she'd been there, and neither would anyone else. She turned to go, and the wind helped her, pushing her back to the shelter of the dugout. But when she was almost there, she knew HMS Beagle was right. That dog would never have to do a searching and fearless moral inventory of herself. Lucky sighed and fought her way through the wind back to Miles. He pressed his face, streaked with tears, snot, and dirt, into Lucky's front and gripped his arms around her neck. I was waiting for Chesterfield to find me, he sobbed, but a coyote came and snuffed me. That was only HMS Beagle, Lucky said. The dugout's on far. Let's go, quick. I can't. I have a cactus in my foot. It hurts. Miles started crying again. It was a cola burr the size of a golf ball. A dozen of its needles stuck deep into Miles's heel. Lucky didn't touch it. She knew very well from the time she had stepped on one that you could not pull it out with your fingers. Plus, she knew that it burned like fire underneath your skin. Where's your shoe? She said into his ear. He hadn't loosened his grip on her neck. I don't know. I lost it. Okay, look. I'm going to carry you piggyback. You have to help by letting go and then climbing on me. Please don't trick me and leave me here, Lucky. I promise I won't, Miles. Come on. Even though she'd had a lot of practice lugging her survival kit backpack all the time, Lucky was surprised at how heavy a 5-year-old boy could feel. She staggered back up the hill to the dugout, feeling as if the day had been going on for weeks. Her worst thought was that she didn't have pliers to grip the cola burr and pull it out. Even if she made a very clumsy glove by folding the dishcloth over and over on itself, the cola's steel hard needles would plunge right through the cloth and get stuck in her hand. Miles sat on the towel with his bare foot propped on his other leg to keep anything from touching the burr and making it hurt worse. She gulped Gatorade, finishing the bottle. HMS Beagle spent a long time lapping water. I already tried to get it out, he said, but it hurts your fingers to touch it. I know, Lucky said. She rummaged through her supplies and survival kit. She'd seen Short Sammy dislodge a bird stuck in the boot by slipping a fork between the needles and the leather and flipping it out instead of trying to pull it out. But Lucky didn't have a fork or even a comb, which also might have worked. She needed something toothed, but the toothbrush bristles were way too soft. Lucky? Miles, I'm concentrating. What? Nothing. Lucky sighed. Okay, what? She sighed in a nicer, paying attention way. You don't look normal. You look kind of fancy. Lucky scowled. But you look pretty and kind of grown up, he added. Lucky thought of herself as someone highly adapted to her habitat, being all one colorless color, rather than pretty. She narrowed her eyes on Miles to see if he was up to something, but he was looking worriedly at the koala burr, with its needle-sharp thorns sticking out in every direction, a dozen of them in his heel. She tucked the thought of prettiness into a safe crevice for thinking about later. Suddenly Miles said, Is Bridget come to make our dinner? No, Miles. We ran away. I didn't run away. Lucky let that go. Then why is her thing for parsley here? Miles added, Just a keepsake, like when you want to remember someone, and Lucky broke off. Her mind had found a great spectacular idea. She plucked Bridget's gadget from the pile of supplies and released its little latch. The two parts separated, a funnel-like part where you crammed in the parsley and a little spoked part with a handle. She gripped the top of Mouse's foot in one hand. Don't move, she said. Very carefully she angled the tin spokes under the cola, and with a hard, sure, sudden twist, she flipped the whole bird away. Ow! Miles cried. All the needles were out, and Lucky kicked the bird aside and then crushed it with a rock. This is quite a mild case, Lucky said professionally as she peered at the foot. It will hurt for a while, so you have to be brave about that. I will, he snuffled. I didn't run away on purpose, Lucky. I was just looking for Chesterfield. You won't get into trouble, don't worry, Lucky said, without knowing if this were actually true. But now she had a major problem named Miles to worry about. Running away is one thing. Running away with a one-toe 5-year-old is much, much more complicated and dreadful.